I'm really happy to be here because I have heard for years and years about this conference and how awesome it is, and now I can see for myself the great energy in this room, and I'm very pleased to be invited here. Thank you. I'll be talking about this somewhat obtuse-looking topic, self-regulation for emotional health and goal attainment after brain injury, and just by way of overview about how I'll proceed today is I'll just be kind of unpacking that title and telling you about the different things that go into it. So first of all, I'm going to be talking about self-regulation and what I mean by that. This is a concept that I have become extremely interested in recent years as I've been working to develop treatment models and try them out on people with brain injury in my clinical research, and I'm finding some very encouraging things. So I'm happy to talk about it. I also want to talk about what it isn't, because the term self-regulation has some connotations that I want to make sure we clarify. And I'll talk, of course, about what this concept has to do with brain injury, because that's the whole point, and what it has to do with emotional health and goal attainment, because that's part of my overall title as well. After sort of a general introduction, then I'll talk about two approaches to treatment that are based on self-regulation models that we're testing right now at Moss and also at other locations. And those, one is problem-solving training, and the other is what we call anger self-management training. And I hope to leave at least 15 minutes for questions and discussion. So let's start by talking about self-regulation and what this is. First thing that I want to convey is that this is, regardless of brain injury, brain intactness, or whatever, self-regulation is a natural human process that we use, all of us, all the time and without usually having to think about it. The best kind of short definition I have for it is what you see on the slide: strategic behavior designed to overcome obstacles in the pursuit of goals. So the word strategic implies that it's important behavior and it's important to fulfill some kind of plan of action. And obstacle suggests that there are problems or things to be overcome. So overall, self-regulation is about taking action to solve problems and also to pursue goals. And in a general sense, then, self-regulation is about behavior change. We all behave constantly all day, every day, and our behavior is constantly changing. Self-regulation is about undertaking behavior change in a deliberate way. What self-regulation is not, what I don't intend to mean by the term, it's not about tightly controlling or restraining ourselves like the very unhappy dog in the corner of the slide. Self-regulation really is not about suppressing our feelings or putting ourselves on a tight leash. It's really about knowing how to adjust what we're doing, what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and becoming more flexible, so that we can meet goals and solve problems. So it's about the way that we adjust. Flexibility means adjustment. It's about the way we adjust the way we think, feel, and behave, again, to meet everyday goals and to solve everyday problems. Now, even though I'm stressing that this is an everyday thing and we do it all the time and most of the time without even thinking about it, I don't want to imply that it's easy, because in fact it's not easy. As human beings, again, never mind brain injury, that'll come in a little bit later, many times we don't, for many reasons, we don't adjust our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors appropriately, and then our goals and our problems become a lot harder to deal with. Behavior is hard to change. That's just part of the human condition. So this is not specifically about brain injury, but as we'll see, brain injury certainly doesn't help the situation. I promise that this is going to be really brief. I'm not going to go through the entire history of psychology. I could, but I figure not enough time. But I do think that it's very interesting to think about the sort of big ideas that have shaped the way we think about behavior and how to change behavior, how to regulate behavior. So thinking back to Freud thought, and it's a very influential theory that still is affecting us today, Freud thought that behavior is driven by these deep unconscious impulses and urges, and we have this thin veneer of conscious, civilized thinking, and then underneath there's this boiling cauldron of unconscious urges. This was his theory about the unconscious. And so we still have in our everyday parlance the Freudian slip, and this is supposed to be a mistake that actually expresses our true feelings. It's your unconscious speaking. And Freud said to change your behavior, you need to deal with your unconscious, and you do that through psychoanalysis, which entailed lying on the couch. And by the way, that is a photograph of Freud's couch. You can see the actual couch in London at the last home that Freud lived in, and it's actually a quite beautiful and exotic looking. You know, he draped it with oriental carpeting and things like that. Anyway, we no longer believe that this is a good way to change behavior, not to mention that managed care would never stand for it. Now, partly as a reaction to Freud and Freudian types of theories, along came in the 1950s or so, B.F. Skinner and the Behaviorists. And they also, very, very influential group of theories. They said that there is no unconscious. There is no conscious, actually. There's nothing inside the head that matters. In the most radical form, this is what they thought. Behavior is driven by its consequences, like reward and punishment. And so all behavior is learned through reactions to the behavior from the environment, and so to change behavior, all you need to do is to change the consequences. Reward me for doing X and punish me for doing Y, and I'm going to do a lot more of X, okay? Now, we no longer believe that either of those two very extreme kinds of theories are very useful in explaining behavior and how to change it, although, you know, there are certain kernels from each of them that we're still using, especially from behaviorism, which, you know, actually did contribute a lot to certain kinds of behavior change methods. But what I think is more fruitful, and what many of us think is more fruitful at this point, is a family of theories called social cognitive theory, and the main name associated with these theories is Albert Bandura, and highly, highly influential. They've actually permeated many parts of our society, industry, academics. You'll see, I'll show you some of the applications in a minute. But this is a kind of a middle ground set of theories that includes self-regulation as an important concept. So the social cognitive theories say that all behavior is goal-directed, that this is an innate feature of human beings, that we are born motivated to change from one state to another, and that we operate by changing behavior all the time. So there's not just one way to change behavior. They thought that there are lots of ways to tap into this innate desire for change. And so the key concept is that we're automatically motivated to move from where we are now to where we would like to be, that human behavior is never static, and that we're always striving to improve our lot. So the idea is that behavior is motivated by a desire to change from some current state to some desired state. So this can be a very simple thing, like the current state is I am hungry. The desired state is that I will no longer be hungry. And so I am motivated to eat. That's my desire to change from one state to another. And any action I take, like making myself a sandwich, could be called goal-directed behavior. Now that's an example of a very, very simple goal, but the idea of social cognitive theory is that we're constantly moving from many current states to many desired states at different levels. If the current state is negative, I guess hunger could be negative, especially if I'm very hungry and I can't seem to find anything to eat, then I have to solve a problem. I have to solve the problem of finding something to eat. If the current state is kind of okay, but it could be better, let's say I've just eaten, but I would like some dessert, then I could set the goal of getting myself a nice dessert. So this is an illustration of how problem solving and goal setting are really two sides of the same coin. It depends on whether you see your current state as an obstacle to be overcome or as a negative thing to be overcome. A note about problems and goals, because we use these terms loosely, and very often when people talk about problems and goals, they're talking about kind of big things, big sort of, huge things. And indeed, there are some goals and some problems that are very big, like really changing your life in dramatic ways, starting a family, getting a new job, finally tackling that substance abuse problem, moving a long distance away, and so forth. But self-regulation applies to the sort of everyday goals and problems too, like I mentioned eating a meal, just thinking about what am I doing today? What would I like to do today? And then, just the sort of ongoing behavioral goals that we have through the day to act appropriately to the situation that we're in order not to cause problems for ourselves. Or to meet small goals like, conveying a friendly attitude towards someone, to make a friend, or not to offend somebody, or to impress somebody, all those kinds of things. And often these kinds of very everyday problem solving and goal attainment behaviors are handled at a very automatic level, almost like a level of habit. And if you think about it, if you had to think constantly about how you were behaving all the time and make a conscious plan about how you were going to behave every second, you wouldn't get anything done. You'd be thinking all the time. So many of these are kind of like, we call them habits. They're sort of like behavior programs that operate automatically, like automatically I'm standing in front of a group of people, so I'm probably not going to engage in all kinds of distracting behaviors like scratching my head or, rubbing my arms, but I don't have to think about inhibiting those. It's automatic. No matter how big or small the problem or the goal is, self-regulation is about how we go about getting there to our desired state. And so it's a general process that we use, again, mostly at an unconscious level, back to Freud. And it's useful, I find it very useful to think of this as a cycle with steps in it that's always in the process of playing out at various levels. And although we're usually not conscious of the cycle, it's a useful model to kind of bring up to the surface because it's useful for designing treatments to think about the various points of the cycle that we're trying to help somebody to strengthen, somebody with brain injury in this case. And there are some treatments that actually focus on teaching the entire cycle, which brings it up, as I mentioned, from the automatic level into more of a conscious focus. And I'm going to show you an example of that momentarily. But here's the way the cycle works. So the first step is the part in red. So at some point you have to detect that there's a need for change. Either there's a problem that that needs to be solved, or there's a goal that you want to attain. The next step is deciding what to do about it, and then do it, whatever your decision is. And then there's some step of having to do with checking success. So you evaluate the success of what you've just done relative to the decision that you made for change. Then, if it worked, you continue it, or you can sort of upgrade it. If it didn't work, then you need to sort of reevaluate and revise your plan. Now, I just mentioned these steps very quickly, and I want to emphasize that in no way is any of this simple, because we, as human beings, we do this in a very sophisticated way, adjusting the way all of our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors to go from one step to the next. And all the time we're doing that, we're adjusting to other people in our environment and what they want and what they're doing, and other things about our physical environment. So this cycle can be derailed at any moment. And in fact, every day, the cycle is derailed at any moment for any of us. And so that's why we need to be flexible. We need to be able to go away from the cycle, come back to it, and to think that this operates automatically without our having to be aware of it is really kind of remarkable that we can do it at all. So one reason I find the cycle helpful to think about is that positive behavior change that is good for someone and that they want to undertake, can happen at any point in the cycle or at all points in the cycle. So we can get better, depending on what we need to get better at, we can get better at identifying problems and goals to begin with. We can get better at making decisions and plans. We can get better at getting started in carrying out the plan and persisting at it. And we can get better at checking on the plan and adjusting the plan as needed, or we can get better at all of it, right? But it's helpful to have this broken down into steps so that you can help your client, or if you're a person with a brain injury, you can ask yourself, what parts of this are hardest for me? Now, what about brain injury? Because so far I haven't even mentioned brain injury and what this has to do with self-regulation. As with so many other things, this is a hard process that's made even more difficult by brain injury. And the whole cycle becomes more difficult many times for people with brain injury. And I like to think of this as, there are plenty of reasons for this, but I think of it as kind of a triple whammy that affects people with brain injury. First of all, the brain is what runs the cycle. This is completely brain-based. And especially the frontal lobes, the good old executive part of the brain, that's really mostly responsible for keeping everything like this on track, and that's so often damaged after a brain injury, or it's a huge part of the brain, and so it's really hard to have a brain injury that doesn't affect the frontal executive part. Secondly, having a brain injury often just completely blows up the various contexts in your life in which you solve problems and create goals, even at a small level. So, very often, the things people are doing every day, going to work or school, are, they disappear, and those are you have a whole fabric of goal setting and problem solving in those environments that goes away. So you get out of practice, and your social networks can often change. So you're not, really working on social goals and problems anymore. So, but the third whammy is that with a brain injury, you have all kinds of new problems to deal with that you've never dealt with before. So maybe you have a lot of pain. Maybe you have cognitive problems that you don't know how to cope with. Maybe you have, 3 new doctors and appointments to remember. And maybe you're fighting with your insurance company. I mean, it can go on and on. Can't drive anymore, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the triple whammy. On the positive side, and again, now backing away from brain injury a little bit, we have a lot of reasons to think that self-regulation can be changed. So, we don't want to try to use this concept for brain injury treatment if it's just sort of a hardwired thing that can't be improved or can't be treated, but there's tons of evidence to show that people can use self-regulation in order to change behavior. So here are some of the applications of these theories that I promised I would tell you about. These social cognitive and self-regulation theories are used constantly to improve sports performance, fitness, business productivity, academic performance. These concepts are used in addictions treatment and treatment of mood disorders like depression. And there's a whole movement, self-management training, that relies heavily on self-regulation to teach people with chronic conditions, health conditions, to manage their own care in conditions like arthritis and cardiac disease and so on. So these concepts are very powerful behavior change, can lead to very powerful behavior change methods. Why shouldn't they work for brain injury? We think that they should. The advantages of applying these concepts to brain injury treatment are many, but here are just a few that come to mind for me. First of all, the concept of self-regulation puts the injured person in charge, or at least in the center of the equation. This isn't somebody else telling you what to do. This is, if you have somebody working with you, it's at least somebody who's coaching you to learn better how to decide what you want to do. And so self-regulation is, I think, a good term for that. Another thing I like about it is that it really doesn't focus on fixing deficits. It doesn't focus on really what's wrong with you and how can we make it better. The focus is on developing skills. These are skills that all human beings have and that all human beings can improve. And so it's a skill building model. It takes the long view because it focuses on the person learning how to adjust to life when all the therapists and doctors are gone or when they're not available or. And I like the universal design element of it that I mentioned this already, that this is just good for all people. We can all benefit from learning how to do better self-regulation. I recommend it. So now that I think I've sort of presented the overall case for using self-regulation as a model for treatment development, I'd like to give you some examples of treatments that we're testing in our research to see if they actually work for people with brain injury. One of the models that we're testing is called Problem-Solving Training, or PST. And this is something that we just brazenly stole from a model that was developed for treatment of depression, and it's problem-solving therapy. We changed it to training. We stole it with permission, by the way. We didn't really steal it. If anybody knows PST for depression, it's really a kind of extraordinary. It was designed to be done in primary care. So it's not, you don't need a psychologist or a psychiatrist to do it. You can have a physician or a paraprofessional do it, and the brief versions of PST are only 2.5 to 4.5 hours. And the idea is that people learn the entire self-regulation cycle, and then thereby they learn how to solve their own problems, and then gradually over time that alleviates depression. That's the theory. So we're testing it not for depression, although depression can be one of the problems that people bring to it, and we're testing it right now in a study that just closed. So we'll be analyzing the data soon. It's a study that's based at University of Washington, and the active duty base is there. And we're testing it in people who are just returned from Iraq and Afghanistan with mild traumatic brain injury. And all of the therapy is done by telephone. And in this therapy, in this PST, people learn how to apply the entire cycle to any kind of problem. And I'm going to walk you through the steps to show you what we're teaching these folks how to do. The sequence that we're teaching them is, the acronym is A, B, C, D, E, F. And I tell you, anybody can learn this acronym. This is the easiest acronym you will ever have to learn. A stands for assess, B for brainstorm, C for consider and choose. I'm going to take you through each step. D is do, E is evaluate, and F is flex or fight on. Now, I'm not going to say don't try this at home, because in fact I do think you can try this at home. It's a nice idea to have a coach or a therapist help you with it, but it's not going to hurt you actually to try some of these steps just from what you hear today. They're harmless. Where to begin is to pick a problem, and because this is really for problem solving. So pick something that's bothering you. Now, what we have our folks do, the service members, what we have them do is actually we have a structured way to have them list all of the problems, all the things that are bugging them about their lives, and that's a helpful way to see how problems can fit together. Often, you might think you have 28 problems, but you really have 5 problems. And they're all kind of intermingled. And then I would say if you pick a problem to do this with, don't start with the hardest problem. Don't start with the biggest problem unless you can break it down into a small thing that you'd like to change. Pick one that will show you some success. This is really important. Back to Skinner and the behaviorists, it is reinforcing to have success. You need to be reinforced early on. You need to see that this actually works. And so don't set yourself up by picking, the humongous problem that, it will take you 5 years to work on. And never tackle more than one problem at a time with this method. It's very tempting to go off and say, oh, I've got this problem. Well, that's really part of this. I think I'll work on both of them. Don't do that. Pick one problem. At least you'll be working on more than you're working on now if you do that. The other problems aren't going anywhere. You can come back to them. The assessment step, A for assess, is the step that we as human beings often skip, and it must not be skipped. This is one of the most important take-home messages when we work with our folks. It's very tempting to say, this is bothering me so much, I'm just going to do something about it. I'm going to do it now. Well, before you do that, that's called leaping before you look. The assessment step is really essential to look before you leap, and it's a way to take stock and get clear about the nature of the problem and to sort out facts from assumptions which may not be fully accurate. My problem is that everybody hates me. That's unlikely, right? So the assessment allows you to kind of step back and take a more objective look at things. So questions to ask yourself during this step: what makes this a problem? Like, what's bothering me about this? How important is it? Is it urgent or is it just annoying? That's a good question to ask because you should start with something that you're motivated to change. This isn't really motivation building. There are other interventions for motivation building, which I'm not dealing with today. But these are techniques that work better with things that, there's already, it's under your skin already. You want to change it. Ask yourself when, where, and with whom does the problem occur, how often. Very important, think back. What have I already tried to solve this? Even if it hasn't been successful, think about the things you've already tried to do. And you might be able to tweak something that didn't work well if you can figure out why it didn't work well. Ask yourself, do I really have control over this? If it's something that is all somebody else, don't try to change somebody else's behavior. Really tackle the parts of it that you have control over. And that might be your reaction to what people are doing. But don't ever call somebody else a problem and work on changing them. That doesn't work for anybody. Is anybody here married? No. So in essence, you might need to go on a reconnaissance mission, a fact-finding mission, and observe your problem for a while before you jump into trying to figure out how to solve it. Part of the assessment phase is to set a specific goal for change. Before you try to change, set a goal that will let you know whether you're succeeding or not, and it should be something that you can measure. Otherwise, you're not going to know whether your plan is working. And you should be realistic with this goal. There's something magic about seeing the effects of your work within 1 to 2 weeks, 10 days. There's something kind of, if you go longer than that, you can lose interest, you cannot be rewarded. Time and again, the research actually shows that you ought to be able to see some kind of result, even if it's not a good result. You need to be able to kind of make a decision about whether it's working in 1 to 2 weeks. If it goes longer than that, it's too big, it's too long. And don't worry about making a small goal, because small gains really add up, and success at a small goal leads to more confidence that you can change. And believe me, anybody can change, anyone. And then that'll lead to more success. The B step, the next step after the assess, after you've got kind of a clear idea about what you want to change, is to come up with as many solutions to this problem as possible. It's good to put them in writing, and it's good not to judge them at this stage. The more ideas you can come up with, the better, and you're not supposed to censor them. Just ask yourself, well, what could I possibly do about this problem? What have I tried? How's it not working? Again, think about what you've done before. You can think about what would someone else do, like the old, what would Jesus do? What would my mom do? What would somebody you respect do? And you're certainly allowed to pick up the phone and call somebody and say, I'm thinking about how I could do, make some changes here. What would you do if you were in my shoes? What do you think I should do? When you consider and choose, that's the C step, now is the time when you judge the solutions that you came up with. You weigh the pros and cons, and you consider how much effort is required, whether you need help from other people, whether it's really a realistic thing for you to be able to tackle. You pick one that's reasonable and doable. There isn't any right or wrong, and you still have all the others, so there's nothing, don't obsess about it. Just pick the one that kind of strikes you as the best one. There's no such thing as failure in this system, as you'll see later on. And you can always set up a plan B in case the first one becomes a big learning experience. Now, do is the most important part of the cycle because this is what it's all about. This is carrying out your plan. This is also the hardest part. This is where all of our good intentions can get lost because it's so easy to think, I just don't feel like doing that, or that's not going to work. So it's crucial that you have a really specific plan. That makes it much more likely that you'll actually try it. The more specific your plan is, the better. And there's a couple mantras that you can keep in your head when you're creating your plan. One is follow your plan, not your mood. That's something that we use in a behavioral depression called behavioral activation. And the idea is that if you wait until you feel like doing something, you're going to be sitting around a long time, or you could be. On the other hand, if you have a plan, it doesn't matter how you feel, just do it, and then you will feel different. And then the other one is the perfect is the enemy of the good. Maybe you can't do your plan exactly as you planned it. Well, that's not a reason to give it up. It's a reason to just do as much of it as you can. So here's an example of an effective plan. An effective plan contains all the details, and it contains what you're going to do if obstacles get in your way unexpectedly. So the more specific, as I said, the more likely it is to be carried out. And if you don't believe this, just try it on yourself. It doesn't matter whether you have a brain injury or not. This works for everybody. So I will get into shape. That's not a very good plan. It's a good idea, but it's not a plan. I will exercise more is getting a little bit better, but it's still not a specific plan. I will go to the gym 3 times a week is pretty good. You're getting there. But the best kind of plan is the one that's at the bottom of the slide that specifies what days, what time, how are you going to get to the gym, what are you going to do there, what are you going to do if it rains, if you're exercising outdoors. So you get the idea. So as you try your plan, you might find barriers. Just take note of them. You'll need to deal with them. What does that sign say? Halfway through? Oh, I'm doing fine. Okay. You might find that your plan is too complicated, so you can just break it down. Do the part that's easier. You may need to try it more than once. Nobody's keeping score. Nobody's hanging over your shoulder. This is just for you. So just try what you think might work. You can develop a plan that partly might need to be rehearsed with other people. So, for example, if part of your plan is what you would like to say to somebody, to express yourself in a certain way or to ask somebody something, part of your plan could be that you're going to rehearse this, either to yourself out loud or to a friend, and so on. Now, here's the evaluate step, and this is where you review the outcome of what you did. How did it go? Did it get you closer to the goal that you set in the A step? Or did it meet it altogether? What worked and didn't work? What could you do differently? Practicing the E step is a really good way to develop the skill of self-monitoring and self-evaluation, which is a real skill. And it's often said that people with brain injury are very bad at doing this. Well, human beings in general are very bad at doing this. Human beings in general don't have a good handle on how they come across to other people in every single situation. There's a lot of variability in this skill, but evaluating actually the effects of what you have just done to try to change your behavior and improve yourself is a good way of developing the skill. When you do the evaluation, don't be too hard on yourself. Remember, this is for you. This is for you. This is not to be an exercise in beating up on yourself. Your plan is not likely to work perfectly the first time. It's a skill development process. Any success you make is a step forward. Any success means you can have more success. You've proved that even if it's small, you can make a change. And you can use the evaluation step to learn about yourself. What did I learn about myself or my situation by whatever happened? And would I use this solution again? If not, what could I change? Are there any other problems where this solution might come in handy? If it did work, what else could I use this for? So what happens if you didn't do anything? And this does happen. You have a whole plan and you just don't carry it out. Or what if you tried your plan and something really unpleasant goes on and you think this is a failure? this doesn't mean that you'll never be able to do it. It's unfortunate, but really try to use it as a learning experience. Failures are just like problems. They're parts of life for all of us. We all have failures, large and small, every day. And failures lead to more information about the problem, and that adds to your fodder for your assessment step, right? It teaches you more about the problem. Definitely try to find out what obstacles prevented you from trying the plan. If you just didn't do it, really try to think, did I try it on the wrong day? How was I feeling? How should I be feeling when I try it again? What would make me really get over that hump? Can I get another person involved in helping to sort of, motivate me, etc. You might actually need to reconsider if it's a complete flop. Am I really committed to solving this problem, or should I try another one that's more important? Or did I have a goal or a plan that was not realistic for me at this moment? Now, what if you can't remember what you did? And this happens too. If you can't remember what you did, and therefore it's hard for you to evaluate the success of what you've tried to do, or if this happens to your client who's working on this, then maybe the memory problem is a problem in itself that can be approached using the A, B, C, D, E. You can go through a whole assessment, brainstorming, considering, and doing thing about how to remember what you've been working on. And you might want to, the solution might be to keep a diary or a log, to send text messages to yourself, or to ask a family member to help out. It all depends on the person, and the person, him or herself, can come up with these solutions. What if your self-evaluation doesn't agree with the evaluation other people might have around you? This happens too with brain injury. If this is a problem, it can also be worked on through the A, B, C, D, E, F. Why is it a problem? What bothers me about it? What could we do to get our evaluations closer together? Now, the final step is flex or fight on. This is what F stands for. Flex means if the plan needs to be adjusted, if it didn't work or worked only partially, then flex, adjust it and try it again. You might, when you do this, have to go back to the B step, brainstorm some new solutions, then you go through your C and D and E again. Fight on, we use this for our military sample, but you can use another term if you don't like the fight. But fight on means if it worked, keep doing it. Keep working on it, keep improving. And even if it worked completely, you might want to think ahead to what might make this problem flare up again, or other situations where it might hit you, and how can you prevent those or deal with those. So let's just look back at the cycle, and around the edge of the cycle, I'm showing you where the different steps in the problem-solving process fit in. So detect a need for change, and then figure out how to change. That's your A step, where you're really thinking, what do I want to change, and why is it a problem? And then B and C, brainstorming and considering, have to do with deciding what to do. Do it is, of course, the D step. E is checking your success, and F is flexing, which is revising, or fight on, which is continue. So it's really teaching the entire cycle of self-regulation. I'm going to now just mention a couple of attitudes that are important that you can embrace to help your problem solving. Some of these attitudes, the reason I didn't talk about this before is that these attitudes can actually be developed through going through a process such as the ABCDEF process, the problem-solving training, but some of them are really kind of inborn, and so it's a good idea to ask yourself what your attitudes are about problem solving to begin with. But these can be changed. These can be changed. So one helpful attitude is that problems are a normal part of life. That we just have problems. That's part of who we are. We encounter problems. And versus, this is so unfair, why me? Well, why you? Because you're a human being and you encounter problems. So it's helpful to think of problems as a normal part of life to be solved, not terrible threats. Another helpful attitude is, I believe I can solve my problems, or at least some of them. At least some of what I'm dealing with is under my control, versus there's nothing I can do. That's never true, but it's an understandable attitude for somebody who feels overwhelmed. The third helpful attitude is when, and these are interesting, 3 and 4 are really interesting. When I feel, and you can fill in the blank here, I think we all have feelings, some state that we could identify that tells us there's something wrong. When I feel bad, sometimes it's just uncomfortable or distressed or discouraged or something. That's a signal to start problem solving, okay? That can be a signal to start the problem solving process, to really start thinking about what's going on that I could change. And the opposite of that is, oh God, I hate this feeling, I need to escape this. Give me a drink, I want a drink. Or I'm gonna blow town. The fourth is related to this, so whatever the fill in the blank is, when I feel bad, uncomfortable, distressed, or whatever, I need to stop and think. So versus getting overwhelmed with this negative feeling and having it prevent you from thinking it through. So the message here is that whatever bad feeling you have when you have a problem of some kind, or when you're conscious of a problem or a need to deal with something, that can start a self-assessment. What's wrong? A thoughtful self-assessment. Instead of an escape, what is the problem here? And that could lead you right into the A phase of the A, B, C, D, E, F. Let me assess the problem. What's going on here? What's bothering me? So these are attitudes that I encourage if you don't have them already. Many people have them already, and those people are considered to be good problem solvers. They function well in the face of adversity. If you don't have these attitudes, you can try to develop them. Now, to completely switch gears, although maybe not so completely, I'm going to tell you about another treatment model that we're experimenting with at Moss that we call anger self-management training for people with brain injury. And this is a protocol also based on self-regulation concepts that we're testing now at Moss and also at Craig Hospital in Colorado as a partner site. And I'm the principal investigator of this project. I'm going to start by just telling you why we wanted to develop this treatment. We saw a great need because the research on people, now this is about traumatic brain injury or TBI, so the research on people with TBI show that many people have problems with anger and irritability after injury. And studies are variable, but it looks like about a quarter to a third of people with TBI complain about anger and irritability. And even if they had these kinds of problems before, many people say they get worse, that these things get worse, their fuse gets shorter. And there are lots of different symptoms. They range all the way from just being touchy and other people, feeling like they have to walk on eggshells around you, all the way through verbal or physical outbursts at other people or at objects, like throwing things. And there's also a lot of anger at oneself. The interesting thing about this is that it doesn't seem to depend on the severity of injury. It occurs after mild injury, all the way up to severe injury. And unlike other problems that can get better over time after brain injury, anger tends to persist, and can even get worse over time, and has a huge impact on family relationships, friendships, the ability to work, and so forth. So we saw a big need to address this as a problem. There are lots of reasons why this is a common problem after brain injury, and only some of them have to do with the direct effects of injury to the brain, but that's part of it, that especially our friends, the frontal lobes and their connection to the emotional part of the brain are often disrupted, and people can become overreactive. But there are also secondary effects from cognitive deficits. When it's harder to think and make yourself understood and to understand other people, this can lead to lots of frustration. Lifestyle changes can also lead to lots of frustration. Mood problems go hand in hand with irritability. And you name it, low energy, high energy, financial problems, pain, fatigue, and all the other things that go along with brain injury can be very frustrating and lead to irritability. When we started developing this treatment, we looked at what was already out there, and we found that there's really not that much. Some therapy programs for brain injury actually exclude people who are too angry because of the concern that they'll have a bad effect on other people. And people who have chronic anger and irritability often burn out their social supports. People just say, I can't take this anymore. And so people that might help you find appropriate treatment can sometimes disappear from your life. There are some drugs that help some people, but nothing that is kind of evidence-based. There are a few, I've listed them on this slide, but we really didn't want to try a medication study. There's a promising, there's a study that's currently being analyzed on amantadine, and we'll be looking for the results of that, a very nicely done trial soon. That may be helpful. Then there's a so-called behavior modification. This is back to the behaviorist idea that you can change the environment. Some of these approaches can work, but it's really hard to change the entire environment for most people. You don't really have control over the environment. And also, the thing I don't like about these approaches is that it doesn't teach the person, him or herself, to really understand the behavior and to work on building the skills. So we decided that we wanted to do more of a skill-building approach, like I mentioned already with self-regulation and the self-regulation cycle. And it does turn out that there's a lot of anger management. I mean, human beings get angry. Again, this is nothing that's unique to brain injury. And there are a lot of anger management programs out there that are based on skill building, how to handle anger, and they're very effective, actually. These are the ones that people have to go to after road rage incidents. They're court mandated and so forth. And so we wondered, can we work with some of these existing methods, add elements specifically for brain injury, and then adapt the skills and approaches specifically for people with serious brain injury. And so that's what we did when we designed the ASMT, Anger Self-Management Training. So we wanted it to teach concepts and skills to the person with the anger. We wanted to be able to include important people in their lives, but that's not required because we know some people don't have those people. We wanted this to be highly structured and step-by-step so anyone could do it. In other words, any therapist could do it if it worked. Anyone could follow it. And we wanted it to be able to stand alone or to be included in a more comprehensive program. And most importantly, we wanted it to work for people with cognitive difficulties, which almost always go along with brain injury. So we didn't want people to have to rely on memorizing a whole lot of stuff and having excellent attention and things like that in order to benefit. So what's included in this program is we have 8 sessions. The significant other, if any, is invited to participate in parts of 3 of the sessions. And I just want to tell you we don't have the results. We don't know that this is effective. We think it is. I just wanted to tell you some of the things that we're emphasizing that people have seemed to resonate with. We do a lot of education about anger. Anger is something that we don't know a lot about. We all feel it, we all experience it, but people don't talk. It's sort of dangerous. People don't really talk about it much. So we do a lot of very open discussion and education about what anger is and talk about how anger is completely normal. We couldn't live without anger. It's our defense. It's necessary for normal life, and so we're not trying to take it away. That's not what self-management is about. It's about teaching someone how to handle their anger differently. And we acknowledge that anger is very hard to change. Behavior is hard to change, period. I already said that. But anger is a very hardwired emotion. It's very deep. It's very primitive. It's a defense mechanism. And we share it with reptiles and tigers and all the other animals. And so it's difficult to change that. We can't change the wiring. And the other thing about anger is that it's reinforcing. It feels good. The last time you blew up at someone, didn't it feel good for about 10 seconds? 10 minutes later, you're thinking, oh my God, I gotta go apologize. But it feels really good. It's a big release, and it solves the problem in a very short-term kind of way, but not in a long-term way. We do a lot of training of people in how to be more aware of one's anger, how to recognize the characteristic signals that we all have in our body and in our behavior. Each of us has signals, things that happen, like our jaw gets tense or our face gets flushed or our voice gets squeaky, or it's different for each person. And this is very important, the last point. We also teach people how to identify the other feelings that are wrapped up with anger. What do I mean by that? So anger is our normal protective response to threat. Anger is what made us either run away or fight back when we were cave people and we were attacked by the other tribe or had a mastodon coming at us or whatever. So understanding that it's our response to threat, we can learn how to be more aware of what the feelings are that signal that we've been threatened. How are we being threatened? And very common other feelings that are wrapped up in anger for people with brain injury are feelings like disrespected, belittled, sad, scared, and confused. So all of these are other feelings they're not angry feelings, but they're wrapped up in a whole complex that includes anger as a defense. So the point of the program is to really show people that when we feel anger signals, we can learn how to ask ourselves, what else am I feeling? What are the other feelings that are not making me angry, but that are wrapped up with my anger? How am I feeling threatened? And we can learn to express ourselves. The person with brain injury learns to express themselves with those other feelings instead. Now, why? Why is that effective? Well, think about what works better. Does it work better to say to somebody, I'm confused, I don't think I really get what you're saying, or versus, what do you mean, you so-and-so? I can't actually say what I've written on my slide. What's going to get a sympathetic response? You're going to get a sympathetic response from saying, I'm not following you. I think I'm confused. Let's go over that again. The second way is going to escalate and start a fight. Why? Because the other person feels threatened by being cursed at. That's a threat to them. So it goes on and on. We also teach people methods to slow down their reaction to anger so that they can respond instead of react without thinking. So the little reflex, the knee-jerk reflex, is a good kind of symbol of this. That's an automatic response. And very often when we're threatened, very often we react very quickly like, what do you mean? Or whatever the phrase is, or swearing, or storming out, or yelling. So we teach people how to slow the response down so they can really think about what they're doing. And then, since they have to have something else to do besides lash out, we teach them strategies how to handle and deal with the anger differently or prevent things from escalating. And what this does is that it just gives the person a bigger repertoire to pull from, more flexibility. Remember, self-regulation is about flexibility. It's about having more responses to pull from. It's about thinking and choosing what you're going to do in a given situation. In practice, we teach all kinds of strategies, but what we found in this program is that people might gravitate toward one thing and use it a lot and have it successful. There's a grab bag of things that they can learn, and it's not necessary for people to learn and remember every single thing that we teach. Some other examples of what we show people is a method called Timeout, and it does not mean, very important that people understand this, it does not mean punishment like the kid in the corner. It does not mean taking a timeout by storming out of the house. Well, you'll never see me again. It means timeout, it's the sports timeout. It's the coach slowing down the game. What do you do when you take a timeout? You get the team over, you have a huddle. It's 2 minutes where you stop the action and you talk about what you're going to do when you get back in the game. That's exactly what the timeout technique is for people in this situation. And then we teach something called the mirror technique, which is, if you're in the habit of communicating negatively with people and talking about what you don't want, like quit making noise, we show that can be flipped around into a positive response, a positive request for what you do want, like, could I have some quiet? I'm getting distracted. So in relation, again, to our self-regulation cycle, we have a lot of emphasis in the anger training protocol on self-monitoring your signals. That's detecting the need for change. We really focus a lot on that because anger is something that comes on you very quickly, and it's a very useful thing to learn more about what your signals are that tell you it's a bad situation, and also the other feelings that go along with anger, as I said. And we emphasize giving people more of a grab bag of strategies so that they can decide what to do after they've slowed the situation down and then actually carry it out. So the questions we have for this trial is obviously we want to know if it works. Do people report less anger after they go through it? And when the significant others are involved, do they agree? Do they see the changes at home? We don't know the answers to these questions yet because we're still running people through the therapy, and we have to wait till the end to get the answers. But we hope that it will work. And we also had to construct a whole different kind of one-on-one therapy to kind of control for the effects of talking to a sympathetic therapist. So we want to know if it works better than that different type of one-on-one therapy. We want to know if it helps with things other than anger, like overall mood and the ability to function in the community, since anger has a detrimental effect on friendship and work and going out. We want to know if it has a good effect on those things. And we want to know if it lasts. So we're testing, we're asking people, whether they've changed right after the treatment is over, but then we're waiting a few months, and then we're asking them again so we can see if the effects persist. We'll have the answers to these questions in around 2016, and that's just it goes to show that if you want to go into research, you have to have a high tolerance for sitting around and waiting to get the answers. But so far, I will tell you that people really seem to like this, and they really seem to relate to it, and they seem to make use of it in daily life. I know this because we're doing a phase that's called treatment enactment, and that treatment enactment refers to, in any treatment trial, the extent to which the person can use the concepts and strategies that they learned in their everyday life, both during and after the trial, during the treatment and then after it's over. And not just in terms of knowledge, like if you gave them a quiz, but in their actual behavior in daily life. Now, imagine how hard this is to measure. We can't follow people around after they're done with our study to see how they're handling everyday anger. But we can ask them, we can use self-report, we can ask them what they're doing and how often they're doing it in terms of carrying out the new things that they've learned. And in fact, we're trying to get at this. So we have a last testing session, quantitative assessment, like a testing session, 2 months after the last therapy session, as I mentioned, to see if if any effects are sticking. But then after that, we do a phone interview. Somebody totally unconnected with the study calls them and does a final phone interview and asks them what they remember. We have a structured list of things, and we want to know what they remember from what they learned and which ones they're using. And then we ask them in general, what's the most valuable things they learned or gained from the trial? And I just wanted to show you some of the quotations some of the things people are saying, which is very encouraging for me. I'm asking a question instead of automatically accusing somebody of something. How about that? So I listen to what people are saying. I don't think I did this before. How about that? This makes it all worthwhile to spend years and years, I'm serious, spend years and years developing these things, writing them over and over again to get them funded by our stingy government, and then running them for years and years and years with no feedback at all. This is why I do this. It's totally worthwhile. Whenever I'm getting annoyed or anything, I say to myself, let me just chill for a minute and think about this. It raised my awareness. I didn't realize a lot of the things that I did before the therapy. I'm catching myself before it happens, or I'm catching myself right after it happens. These are things they're saying months afterwards, and these are exactly like if I wrote out what we're teaching people, this is exactly what I would say, and they're doing these things in their daily life, and this absolutely makes it worthwhile. And I just hope that it's borne out in the official results that we get when we do our testing. So in conclusion, I would offer, I hope I've convinced you that self-regulation is a useful framework for people with and without brain injury who want to change, who want to solve problems, achieve goals, and feel better in various kinds of ways. And that right now we're testing treatments for the anger, problem-solving training, and we're also doing a trial for people with depression and anxiety, or anxiety, which I didn't discuss today. It's kind of at the beginning, but it uses, it approaches the self-regulation cycle at a different point, at a special point between an intention to do something and the actual carrying out of the plan. In the future, we'd also like to try some of these concepts in vocational rehabilitation, although we haven't started to do that yet. And I think the next study that we're going to be doing is trying to incorporate use of technology, like smartphone technology, to help coach people in self-regulation. There's an app for everything, so why not this? And I want to thank you for your attention, and if anybody has any questions or comments, please feel free to email me.